The FBI announced earlier this week what appears to be an evolution of a scam that is targeting teenage boys, where the boys are being extorted for money in exchange for not releasing nude photos that the kids have been convinced to give out. It's horrendous. It's even worse than you might think, as we'll describe. At least 3,000 children have already been victims of these schemes just this year. Okay, mostly teenage boys, although not exclusively. And it is believed that up to a dozen suicides have been linked to this particular scam. Here's how it works. Many think that they're chatting online with kids around their own age, but are quickly manipulated into sending explicit pictures and then blackmailed for money with threats to release the images. Most victims are between 14 and 17, but kids as young as 10 have been targeted. Many of the current wave of schemes are believed to be originating with scammers based in West African countries like Nigeria and the Ivory Coast. The suspects typically pose as kids of similar age, often using a girl's profile picture and even listing schools or adding friends to make it look like they live in the same area. This can happen on Instagram or Facebook or even in gaming and video chats. Like literally in a game, somebody could pursue you for this. The director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, says victims may feel like there's no way out. It's up to all of us to reassure them that they are not in trouble, there is hope, and they're not alone. So let's talk about a particular instance of this. Someone has been arrested for doing this, Jonathan Cassie. You can see here a photo of the individual, 25-year-old, who had been posting under Emily Smith and Cassie Jonathan, like changing the name around to snare people. According to authorities in this case, Cassie sent Ryan Last, the victim, a romantic picture of a young female and asked for one of him in return. Immediately after Ryan shared an intimate photo of his own, the criminal demanded $5,000, threatening to send the photo to his friends and family and make it public. Hours later, Ryan took his own life. Absolutely devastating. And that is one case out of at least 3,000 that have been identified, let alone all of the others out there who were like so embarrassed or ashamed about it that they didn't reach out to law enforcement. And that's just 1 year in just one country. Who knows how wide this is? Now, Jayar, I know you have kids. I don't know if you think at all about these sorts of scams or how you get your kid prepared for it or whatever, but I can't even imagine trying to navigate all this as a young person.
It's still early for us. Kid's 11, so I mean, I don't think so. But it's one of those things where as it approaches and as it comes to that age and his interactions, each kid is different, obviously, and knowing what your kid's about and their interests and all that stuff to a degree as much as you can, because we know kids don't say everything. This is the scary part. This is what I assume every parent is afraid of as their kid reaches age, and how honestly interacting with people is so much different because there's no direct relation to it. Like back in the day, my father could talk to me about stuff, and it's somewhat still the same way. They still met people in person, even more so than even the way I did when I was a teenager, or the use of phones was different, even though it's still just house phones. There's always a different change, but in this particular case, how people find a way to warn their kids to see it happening before it goes down. And look, it took hours in this particular case, from the moment of the threat to the moment of when he decided to take his own life. Where do you find that moment to be like, yo, we need to have this conversation? Then if that's not anywhere on their radar, that's an embarrassing conversation. So it's hard all the way around. If you come to your kid and be like, hey, if you're sending your penis around on the internet, they can be like, whoa, where'd you get this from? And you kind of, it chills that conversation, and you don't want to have it anymore if you're wrong about it or if they don't want to talk to you about it. It's really, really hard to find a way to get into this before it gets bad.
Yeah. It's devastating. I know. I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but it reminds me of an episode of Black Mirror. It wasn't exactly the same situation. They didn't just ask for money, but I honestly even wonder if maybe that episode might have inspired some people to do this sort of thing. Look, obviously, we need to do whatever we can to make sure that people know they're educated about the presence of these sorts of scams. And by the way, there are so many. Some that operate on the phone, some that operate online. We need to educate people about them, but also try to remove some of the stigma and shame around so many of these things. People being terrified at the consequences of things being revealed, that isn't necessary. And I understand that there are powerful cultural forces that want people to be ashamed of all sorts of things about who they are. We're trying to fight back against that. This would be one of maybe the extra perks of that, is that people wouldn't feel like their life is gonna be absolutely over if a nude photo of them comes out, or if some fact about their sexuality or their identity comes out. we can try to reassure people that their life isn't necessarily over just because a bit of info might be revealed. So just devastating. We need to make sure that people know about this to avoid these tragic outcomes.
Very good point about sexuality too, because that gets used against people all the time.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.